Welcome to this training on good clinical practice. Today, we are diving deep into one of the most vital roles in any clinical trial. We're going to break down the comprehensive responsibilities of the sponsor.
To really get a handle on this, we're going to look at it through 5 key areas. First, we'll define the sponsor and their ultimate authority. Then, we'll walk through the 4 pillars that every successful trial is built on: the quality framework, trial management, data and safety oversight, and finally, what it takes to properly complete the trial.
All right, let's start at the very beginning. Before we get into the what, we have to understand the who. Who exactly is the sponsor, and what does it mean to have ultimate authority?
So, according to the official GCP guidelines, the sponsor is the entity that gets the ball rolling, manages the process, and pays the bills. But the most important word here is responsibility. It doesn't matter if it's a huge pharma company or a single academic institution, the buck stops with them. They are accountable for absolutely everything.
Okay, on to our first pillar, the quality framework. Because the sponsor holds all that responsibility, they can't just cross their fingers and hope things go well. No, they have to build a rock-solid quality framework before the trial even thinks about starting.
And this isn't just some friendly suggestion, it's a requirement. We're talking about a proactive system that has to be in place from the earliest design stages all the way through to the final archiving. And its sole purpose? To protect the people in the trial and to make sure the data we get is trustworthy.
The modern way to do this is with a risk-based approach. It's a constant cycle. You have to identify what could go wrong, figure out how bad it could be, and then put controls in place to stop it. But it doesn't end there. You're always communicating about those risks, reviewing them, and reporting on them. It never really stops.
So, how does this actually work in the real world? Well, sponsors have a toolkit. They use things like standard operating procedures, SOPs for short, which are basically the rule book for the trial. They use airtight contracts to make sure everyone knows their job, and they're super careful about who they hire to help, keeping a close eye on them.
And that brings up a really crucial point about delegation. A sponsor can absolutely hire a specialist company called a contract research organization, or CRO, to handle some of the work. But, and this is a big but, they can only delegate the tasks, never the responsibility. If the CRO makes a mistake, it's the sponsor who is still on the hook, legally and ethically.
Okay, so we've got our quality system. Now let's move to the second pillar, trial management and operations. This is where the rubber meets the road, where the plan turns into action.
You can think of these as the logistical backbone of the whole operation. The sponsor has to find the right doctors and sites, make sure there's enough money to finish the trial, and do all the paperwork to get the green light from regulators and ethics committees. None of this is optional.
A massive part of these operations revolves around the investigational medicinal product, or the IMP. This is the actual drug or device being tested, and the sponsor's responsibility for it is, you guessed it, all-encompassing.
The sponsor oversees this thing from cradle to grave. They have to make sure it's manufactured correctly, labeled perfectly to keep the study blind, and shipped reliably. And when it's all over, they have to track down every last unused pill or vial and make sure it's dealt with properly.
So, the trial's up and running. Participants are enrolled. The product is being used. Now, the million-dollar question: how does the sponsor make sure it all stays on track and, most importantly, that everyone involved is safe? Well, that brings us right to our third and maybe most critical pillar.
Let's dig into the sponsor's ongoing oversight duties. This is anything but a passive role. It is all about active, real-time monitoring to protect participants and to guarantee that the data we're collecting is solid. In our digital age, almost all trial data is electronic. So the sponsor is on the hook for making sure every single computer system is validated, secure, and has a clear audit trail. That means we can see who changed what and when, and that the integrity of the study blind is protected at all times.
And here's a key point. It's not enough to just collect the data. It has to be verifiable. The sponsor has to make sure that anyone who needs to check it, like monitors or auditors, can get direct access to the original source documents. That kind of transparency is a cornerstone of GCP. It's non-negotiable.
Nothing is more important than participant safety. Nothing. The sponsor has a constant, urgent duty to review all the safety data as it comes in. They have to keep investigators updated and report serious adverse events to the authorities under incredibly strict and often very short deadlines.
Yeah, it's really important to know the difference between 2 key terms, audits and inspections. An audit is an internal check.
The sponsor does it on themselves to make sure they're following the rules. An inspection, on the other hand, is external. That's when a government body like the FDA shows up to review everything. A sponsor has to be ready for both.
And if you want to know how urgent this can get, just look at that number, 7. In the UK, if a sponsor finds out about a serious breach, something that could actually harm a patient or invalidate the data, they have exactly 7 days to report it to the authorities. That's it. The clock starts ticking immediately.
And that brings us to our final pillar, completing the trial. You see, the sponsor's job isn't over when the last patient goes home. In fact, you could argue some of the most crucial work happens after the clinical part is finished.
The end of a trial is governed by strict deadlines. If you have to stop a trial early, you've got 15 days to notify regulators. If it ends normally, you have 90 days. Then you've got 1 year to submit the massive final study report. And even then, you're not done. You have to archive all those records for at least 5 years, often much, much longer.
So yeah, the duties go on long after the trial is over. The sponsor has to tell the investigators what happened, they have an ethical duty to publish a summary of the results so the public knows, and of course they have to make sure every important document is safely stored away for years to come.
You know, this quote just says it all, doesn't it? It perfectly captures the massive scope and weight of this role. From the very first idea to the last piece of paper filed away, it all comes back to the sponsor's ultimate responsibility for the people and for the science.
So I'll leave you with a question to think about. After hearing all this, what do you think is the hardest part? Is it the day-to-day operations, the urgent safety reporting, or maybe the long-term archiving? Really thinking about the challenges is the first big step to truly mastering good clinical practice.